My name is Zara, and as far back as I can remember, my life has been intertwined with Islam. I grew up in a deeply religious family, where faith was not just a religious practice, but the foundation of everything we were. From a young age, I learned the importance of prayer, the discipline of fasting, and the beauty of submitting to Allah's will. My parents were extremely devout and had only one desire: for my brothers and me to follow the right path, honoring our faith and staying away from anything that could lead us astray. I memorized lengthy passages from the Quran. I never stopped praying 5 times a day, and I did my best to live in a way that pleased Allah. From a young age, I was taught that Christianity was a corrupt religion, evolving over time, and therefore unreliable. Jesus, or Isa as we called him, was just a prophet, nothing more. This belief was so deeply ingrained in me that I never felt the need to question it. I was completely convinced that I was on the right path. My commitment to faith filled me with pride, and I believed that if I followed all the rules and performed every ritual, I would be rewarded in the afterlife. But as I grew older, something within me felt incomplete. At first, I didn't understand what it was. I was doing everything right, but a persistent emptiness accompanied me, a feeling hard to describe. It wasn't a lack of faith. It was something deeper, a discomfort I couldn't name. Instead of facing it, I chose to ignore it, considering it a passing phase. I dedicated myself even more to my faith. I prayed more, I fasted more. I gave of myself with even greater fervor, convinced that this way the emptiness would disappear. Then came the day that changed everything. It all started with a subtle discomfort, a nagging pain in my stomach that just wouldn't go away. At first, I didn't think much of it, assuming it was fatigue or something I had eaten. But as days passed, the pain intensified, becoming unbearable. I tried to endure it, refusing to complain or show any weakness, but my family insisted that I see a doctor. I remember the cold, sterile office, the sound of my heart pounding in my ears as I waited for the results. Then I heard the words that shattered my world. "You have cancer." My chest felt tight as the weight of that phrase crashed down on me. Cancer, something I had only known through distant stories, tragic news, reports from acquaintances. I had never imagined this could happen to me. I was young, healthy, with my whole life ahead of me. How could this be real? My mind was filled with questions, but deep down, a silent fear began to grow. Was this a punishment? Had I done something to displease Allah? My family reacted exactly as I expected, through prayer. My mother cried out to Allah every night, pleading for His mercy. My father, always a strong and silent man, looked broken as he begged for my healing. My brothers recited the Quran around me, hoping that the sacred words would bring about a miracle. And I did the same. I fell to my knees, pressed my forehead to the ground, and begged Allah to relieve me of this illness. I believed that if I showed enough devotion, I would be healed. The doctors offered treatments, but my family hesitated. Allah is the greatest healer, my family constantly reminded me, asking me to place all my trust in Him. But as the months went by, instead of getting better, I felt. The relentless pain drained my strength until even the simplest tasks became impossible. My body was deteriorating, my hair was falling out in clumps, and when I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized the person I saw. The doctors were straightforward. If I didn't start treatment immediately, I wouldn't have much longer to live. My family was divided. Some urged me to fight, to do everything I could to survive. I felt trapped between two fears, the fear of going against my faith and the instinctive fear of death. But beyond the physical pain, something else was growing inside me, something even more terrifying. The void that had always been hidden in my mind became unavoidable. It was no longer a distant whisper, but an overwhelming presence. I had always believed that my faith would bring me peace, but in the moments I needed it the most, all I found was silence. I told myself it was a test, that I needed to be patient, that my devotion would one day be rewarded, but deep down, I started to feel abandoned. I had done everything right, so why did I feel so alone? Over time, thoughts I had never dared to allow began to surface. What if I had spent my whole life believing in something that wasn't true? What if there was something more, something I had never seen? These questions terrified me. It felt like a betrayal of everything I had always stood for, but despite all my efforts to ignore them, they refused to go away. Then came the night when my body finally gave up. I remember lying on a hospital bed, each breath more difficult than the last. My lungs burned, my strength was gone. Their voices mingling with the incessant sound of the monitors, I tried to hold on to life, but I felt myself slipping away. The room became distant, the voices muffled. My vision blurred, and then darkness. I had always wondered what it would be like to die. I imagined it would be terrifying, painful, full of regret. But what happened next was something I didn't expect. The moment my consciousness faded, I felt the freedom. The pain disappeared. The weight of my suffering dissipated like smoke in the wind. Never in my life had I felt such lightness. I realized I was no longer in my body. I floated, looking down at everything from above. I saw the doctors rushing, their faces tense as they tried to revive me. My mother held my hand, crying uncontrollably. My brothers in prayer had faces covered with tears, but I felt no fear, no sadness. Then, in the distance, I saw a light. It wasn't an ordinary light, but something pure, radiant, alive. It seemed to be calling me, and an irresistible force drew me toward it, as if it was guiding me home. An indescribable warmth enveloped my being, unlike anything I had ever known. I had expected darkness, I anticipated judgment, maybe even nothingness, but instead, there was light, and then I heard a voice. It was firm yet full of tenderness, so powerful that it sent shivers through my soul as I recognized it. It called my name, not in condemnation, not in anger, but in a way that made me understand deep within my being that I was going to know the truth. My body, now so far away, continued to deteriorate. The sterile smell of the hospital, the beeping of monitors, my mother's sobs. Everything felt like it belonged to a reality that I no longer inhabited. I had prayed, I had pleaded, I had surrendered to the faith that shaped me, but in the end, the illness kept consuming me. I knew my time had come. Each breath was harder than the last. My chest hurt. My limbs were numb. Death was no longer a distant fear. It was real, present, unavoidable. My family was still around me, eyes red, whispered prayers mingling with silent tears. My father held my hand tightly, as if he could stop me from leaving. My mother pressed her forehead against mine, her burning cries against my skin. I wanted to tell them not to be afraid, that I was at peace, but the truth is, at that moment, I didn't know what I was feeling. I had spent my life believing that at my death, my soul would enter the barzakh, the veil between this life and eternity, where I would wait for the final judgment. I had always been told that if I was faithful, I would find rest. Otherwise, I would face suffering. But when I finally crossed the threshold of death, there was no terror. There was no anticipation, just a serene and unfamiliar silence. The fighting had stopped, the suffering had faded away. I took a final breath, and with that, everything changed. It was no longer in my body. At first, I didn't understand. I could still see the room, but something was different. Everything felt clearer, more alive, as if I were outside of time. I looked down and saw myself there motionless. My father, in tears, was murmuring desperate prayers. The doctors rushed around, their voices full of urgency, trying to bring me back, but I wasn't desperate. I didn't want to return to my body. Instead, I was overwhelmed by an immense peace. It wasn't the darkness I had been taught to fear. It wasn't emptiness. It was something more, presence, a light. It appeared before me, shining but not blinding, accompanied by a warm breeze. It wasn't just light. It was a presence radiating love, compassion, and power. It was something beyond anything I had ever experienced. When I saw it, I felt like I had always known it, yet somehow I had forgotten. I was frozen, unable to look away. Then a voice echoed, "Zara." The sound struck me deeply. It wasn't just any voice. It was pure truth. It brought me authority, but also an indescribable love, deeper than anything I had ever felt. It wasn't just a call of my name. It was a recognition. Someone had seen me, had known me like no one ever had. Could it be Allah? The thought comforted me, yet troubled me at the same time. I had always been taught that no one could see Allah, that His presence was too great for human understanding. But this light, this presence before me, was more real than anything I had ever known. The light intensified, filling all the space around me. The world had vanished, the hospital, the cries of my family, everything dissolved. It was just me and this overwhelming presence. I tried to speak, but the words failed me. My thoughts swirled in a whirlwind of wonder and doubt. I had spent my life believing that Christianity was wrong, that Jesus was just a prophet. And yet, in the face of this light, I felt something undeniable. Then the voice spoke again, and these words penetrated deep into my soul. "I was waiting for you." My breath caught. Even though I no longer had a physical body, how was this possible? How could someone I had never met speak to me like this, as if I had belonged to him forever? A memory surfaced. Years ago, a Christian friend had told me about Jesus. She had said that he called his disciples by name, that he knew them even before their birth. At the time, I had considered it a mere Christian belief, but now, I wasn't so sure. Every part of my being longed to move closer, to be nearer to this presence that felt more real than anything I had ever experienced. But my mind resisted, fighting against everything I had been taught. Could it be possible? Could it really be him? I stood there, suspended between everything I knew and the undeniable truth unfolding before me. My journey was just beginning, and then I saw him. At the center of the light, there was a figure, radiant, powerful. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced, overwhelming yet peaceful, infinite yet intimate. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. Before my mind could comprehend, my body gave in. I knelt down. It wasn't a choice. It was an inevitable response to such glory. Even though I no longer felt a physical body, my entire soul trembled. I knew him. I had always known his name. In the Quran, he was Isa, a prophet, a great man. But now standing before him, I immediately knew he was more than that, much more. His eyes met mine, and inside I saw it all: love, sadness. They didn't just look at me. They saw me, not just my appearance or my soul, but my entire existence. Every thought, every doubt, every fear I tried to ignore. But there was no condemnation, no anger, no judgment, just love. A love deeper than anything I'd ever known. Then he said, "I knew you before your birth." Why was I here? I was absolutely sure my faith was correct, and yet, in front of him, something within me crumbled. Was I wrong? Jesus stepped forward, and his presence enveloped me, like waves crashing on the sand. It wasn't just power, it was love, an infinite and unconditional love, unlike anything I had ever felt. I thought I knew love. It wasn't just an emotion, it was a force, a truth more real than anything I had ever known. My voice finally broke through the storm of emotion within me. Why do I murmur? Why am I here? Jesus looked at me with sadness and tenderness. Because I have something to show you. His voice wasn't just sound, it was truth. It pierced through me, filling every part of my being. I wanted to question him, demand answers, but at that moment, I realized I already knew. I had spent my whole life searching. I followed the rules, tried to be good enough. I did everything I was taught to secure my place in paradise. I did everything right, but deep down, there was always an emptiness, a feeling I could never explain. Now I understood. I was searching for him. Jesus reached out his hand, and as he did, my whole life flashed before me, not just the moments I remembered. My prayers, my doubts, the feelings I had ignored. Whenever I heard about him, He was always there. Every time I questioned myself, every time I felt a subtle call in my heart, every time I heard his name, something inside me stirred. He was calling me, and I ignored it. Tears flowed when the truth hit me like a ton of bricks. I had spent my entire life rejecting him, denying him, but he never abandoned me. And there he was, not pushing me away, not condemning me. He welcomed me with open arms. For the first time, I understood what grace was. For the first time, I knew what it was to be truly loved unconditionally, without reserve. For the first time, I was seen, and I accepted it. My whole life, I believed I had to earn God's love, that I had to be good enough, follow the rules correctly, do enough to win his favor. But now, standing in front of Jesus, I realized how wrong I had been, that love. For the first time, I understood what it truly meant to belong. Jesus reached out his hand once more, and this time, I did not hesitate. I took his hand, and in that moment, everything changed. When he spoke, I felt like my soul was laid bare. Those words were more than just sounds. They held a deep weight, resonating within me, shining a light on everything I had hidden. You followed the rules, but you never met me. Those words, spoken with a painful tenderness, struck my heart with a force I could never have imagined. My whole life, I believed that faith was about obedience, adhering to the commandments with discipline, devotion, and fear. I prayed 5 times a day, I fasted during Ramadan, did good works, and recited the Quran with dedication. But now, there, in front of Jesus, something struck me. I had never really known God. I feared him, I revered him, I sought his approval, but I had never experienced his presence like I do now. I had never felt such deep, personal, and unconditional love. I always imagined God was watching me with judgment, critically observing my mistakes. But now, standing in front of Jesus, I saw something different. He looked at me with love, even in spite of all my failures. Jesus raised his hand again, and suddenly, I was no longer in that radiant presence. Instead, I saw my life unfold before me, as if I were watching past moments. I saw myself as a child, kneeling next to my mother, reciting prayers I never really understood. I found myself fasting during Ramadan, feeling a sense of pride in my discipline, yet I never felt closer to God. I found myself defending my faith with arguments, convinced I knew more than the Christians, but never questioning if I was truly seeking the truth. Then the scene changed. I saw the moments when something stirred within me. I remembered when I first heard about Jesus and felt something inexplicable in my heart. I recalled a Christian friend sharing their testimony, and for a brief moment, I felt a pang in my chest, but quickly dismissed it. I remembered the verse about Isa in the Quran and wondered why he seemed different from the other prophets. I recall secretly watching a video of a Christian describing how she encountered Jesus in a vision. At that moment, I was shaken, but I was too afraid to question it. I had pushed all these moments aside, convinced they meant nothing. But now, watching all this unfold before me, I understood. Jesus had called me my whole life, and I had ignored him. Tears began to flow from my eyes, and with a trembling voice, I asked, I was wrong, wasn't I? Jesus didn't respond with condemnation. He didn't remind me of my mistakes or bring me shame. Instead, he looked at me with an irresistible, pure love that completely broke me. Then he raised his hand again, and suddenly, the scene changed once more. Distant screams echoed, whispers of despair filled the air, and I felt a void so immense it sent chills down my spine. But in the midst of that darkness, I saw a cross shining. The scene changed again, and I now see Jesus, beaten and bloodied, carrying the cross on his back. His body was marked, so wounded that I could hardly bear to look at him. I saw people laugh at him, spit on him, shout in anger, but despite that, he kept moving forward, step by step, in pain, in agony. I wanted to look away. I wanted to close my eyes, to erase that vision, but I couldn't. I had always been taught that Jesus was a prophet, a man of God, but nothing more. I was taught that he did not die, that someone else took his place at the crucifixion, that it was all just an illusion. But now, standing there, watching this scene, I knew the truth. Jesus did not die as a victim, not as a failure. He died as a sacrifice. He bore every sin, every burden, every ounce of suffering, accepting it all with love. Not because he had to, but because he loved. I saw him fall under the weight of the cross, struggling to rise again. In time, I saw his hands and feet pierced with nails. I saw his body hanging between heaven and earth. Then I saw him lift his eyes and cry out, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do." In that moment, I broke down. I fell to my knees, sobbing uncontrollably. For the first time, I understood true grace. I had spent my life believing that salvation had to be earned, that I had to be good enough, righteous enough, obedient enough to receive God's mercy. But now, faced with the truth, I realized that salvation was not something I could achieve. It was a gift. Jesus had paid the price for me, for my sins, for my blindness, for every moment I had turned my back on him. He had already done it all, and all I had to do was accept it. I looked at him again, my vision blurred by tears. "Why did you do this?" I whispered. His voice was gentle, yet it carried the weight of all eternity. "Because I love you." In that moment, I knew I could never be the same again. Once more I reached out, wanting only to touch the hem of his garment, wanting to stay in that place forever. But before I could do that, everything around me began to change. Something was stirring within me, something was changing. My body, which had been weak, broken, and dying, was healing. I now felt a warmth coursing through me, a strength I couldn't explain. I felt alive, brimming with energy, something beyond human strength. I looked at Jesus, breathless. "I don't understand," I whispered. He smiled. "It's not your time yet." And with those words, the vision faded. I felt distant, pulled back from where I had come. When he spoke those words, I felt something shift deep within me, as if a veil had been lifted from my eyes, revealing things I had never considered before. Throughout my life, I had always believed that faith was about discipline, about earning my place before God through good deeds, obedience, and trying to prove I was worthy. But now, standing in front of Jesus, I realized something that shook me to my core. Faith had never been about fear. It had always been about love. As soon as this thought settled within me, the scene around us changed. The light of his presence continued to shine, but something else appeared before my eyes. A vision so powerful, so overwhelming that I could barely comprehend it. I saw the world from above as if I were looking down from the sky. At first, everything seemed normal. The cities, the towns, the people going about their daily lives. A thick darkness spread over certain areas, enveloping them like a heavy fog. This was not ordinary darkness. It moved like a living force. I could hear whispers within it, words of doubt, fear, and deceit. "You are not enough. God will never love you. You need to work harder. Otherwise, you will never be worthy." The whispers were incessant, surrounding millions of people, pressuring their minds, poisoning their faith. I turned to Jesus, my heart racing. "What is this?" I asked, looking at his sorrowful face, his eyes filled with deep love. He responded with quiet regret. "It's the enemy's greatest weapon, deception." I saw people bowing in prayer, tears in their eyes, desperately trying to prove something to God. I watched them fast until their bodies grew weak, giving everything they had, living in constant fear of never being enough. Some were so terrified of making mistakes that they thought a single misstep could lead to eternal punishment. Others lived in guilt, convinced they could never be forgiven. But then, something even more painful was revealed. I saw people completely turning away from God. Some were exhausted, too, tired to keep striving for perfection. They gave up their faith. Others were consumed by bitterness, believing that God was distant, cruel, or impossible to please. My heart ached. I knew this struggle well. I had lived it too. I had spent my life trying to be good enough for God, fearing that in failure, he would turn his back on me. But now, Jesus was showing me the truth. "This is never what I wanted for my children," he said. I turned to him, my voice trembling. "How can they not see? How can they not know that you are the truth?" Jesus looked at me with deep compassion. "They are blinded by fear, but I have come to set them free." Suddenly, the vision changed again. I saw rays of light breaking through the darkness, shattering it. These rays came from people who had found the truth, people who, like me, had known Jesus. They shared their testimonies, telling others about the grace, the freedom they had found. And then I saw something incredible. The darkness disappeared every time the name of Jesus was spoken with truth. Every time someone turned to him in faith rather than fear, the grip of the enemy weakened, the lies lost their power, chains were broken, and hearts opened wide. People who had lived in fear their entire lives suddenly felt peace. Those who believed they could never be good enough now understood grace. Those who were lost in confusion and doubt finally saw the truth. Tears streamed down my face. It was the power of faith. Faith wasn't about following rules to earn God's love. Faith was about accepting the love he had already given. Jesus turned to me again. "Many of my children are still searching, but they don't know where to look. That's why you need to go back." I shook my head, overwhelmed. "How can I do that?" "They will never believe me, my family, my community. They will reject me." He placed his hand on my shoulder, and a warmth enveloped me, a strength I couldn't explain. "Some will reject you, but others will listen. You are not responsible for those you believe in. You are only responsible for speaking the truth." I swallowed hard, understanding what he was asking of me. Jesus wasn't just giving me another chance at life. He was sending me back to tell others what I had seen, to let them know they no longer needed to live in fear. He wanted me to tell them that salvation wasn't something they had to work for. It was a gift he had already paid for. I took a deep breath. "But I am weak," I admitted. "I don't know if I will have the courage," Jesus smiled. "You won't do this alone." In that moment, I felt it deeply. I felt his presence fill me with a strength that wasn't mine. I knew that upon my return, things would never be the same again. I knew people would question me, that I would be rejected, that some would think I was lying or had gone crazy. But I also knew I couldn't remain silent because now I had seen the truth. And once you see Jesus, you'll never be the same again. The light around me began to change, and I felt something pulling me back, the peace, the warmth, the immense love of Jesus. I gasped, trying to hold on, but it was too late. He was being sent back. A deep warmth spread throughout my body, like nothing I had ever felt before. It began at the very core of my being, radiating outward, filling me with an immense sense of peace. There was no pain, no heaviness. I looked at myself, my hands trembling slowly, in shock. The burden of the illness, the fatigue that made every movement a struggle, had vanished. My limbs felt strong, my breathing was steady and full. I could feel life surging within me, an energy where there had been none before. Tears filled my eyes as I realized. It was impossible. I had been dying. My body had been failing day by day. The doctors had lost hope. I had lost hope, and yet I turned to Jesus, my voice barely a whisper. "What have you done?" He looked at me with a love so deep, so unwavering, that it took my breath away. "I have made you new." The moment I awakened, everything felt different. The pain that once consumed me was gone. My breathing was easy. My body, once fragile and weak, now felt strong. The hospital room filled with murmurs of disbelief. The doctors looked at the monitors, shaking their heads, unable to comprehend what had happened. My mother grabbed my hand, whispering prayers of gratitude, while my father and brothers stood frozen, their faces filled with shock. One doctor hesitated before speaking. "This doesn't make sense," he murmured. The cancer was advanced. There was nothing more we could do. Another checked my vital signs, coming to the same conclusion. Clinically impossible. It wasn't a medication, nor was it luck. I had encountered Jesus. He had healed me. My mother cried as she lifted her hands in prayer. Allah has saved you, she exclaimed. My heart tightened. I wanted to hold on to that moment of joy with her. I wanted to let her believe what she had always known. But how could I? I had seen the truth. I stood before the Son of God. I couldn't deny what had happened. My father's expression darkened. My brothers exchanged worried glances. I met Jesus, I said, my voice steady despite the growing fear in my chest. He healed me. My mother stepped back, her face twisted with confusion and sadness. My father's jaw tightened. My older brother stepped forward, his fists clenched at his sides. Sister, don't say such things, he warned. I knew what I had just done. I had spoken the truth, a truth that could change everything, change my whole life. I had been taught that Jesus was just a prophet, that Christianity was false, and that to say such things was blasphemy. But I had seen him. I stood before him, and now I knew I could never go back. Jesus had saved me, and now I faced a choice: remain silent or share the truth. You are confused, she said desperately, reaching for me. Again, you were sick, my son. You were unconscious. You must have imagined it. I shook my head, the truth burning strong within me. It wasn't imagination. My voice grew stronger. I saw him. I felt his love. He told me the truth. He is the way, the truth, and the life. Enough, his voice thundered, echoing through the small hospital room. You will not speak such lies in this house. A cold fear washed over me. I knew this moment would come, but that didn't make the pain any more bearable. It's not a lie, I said gently. I have seen the truth. One of my younger brothers shook his head, looking at me as if I were a stranger. Sister, please, don't do this. You don't know what you're saying. But I did know. For the first time in my life, I knew exactly what I was saying and what it would cost me. My father turned to my mother. She is not well, he said firmly. She is confused because of her illness. She will get better, and we will forget her nonsense. My mother nodded quickly, clinging to his words like a lifeline, but I could see the fear in her eyes. I could have stayed silent and pretended it was nothing. That would have been easy. But I had been given a second chance in life, and I knew I had to use it to discover the truth. I can't deny what I saw. I'm not going. My father turned his back on me. My mother covered her face with her hands. My brother mumbled something into his beard and left. I was losing them, but I still felt at peace. But he also told me to speak, no matter what, so I would speak, even if it cost me everything. A few days after my release from the hospital, I found myself in front of a small church. My heart was racing as I hesitated at the entrance. I had never set foot in a church before. I had spent my whole life believing that Christianity was corrupted and that churches were places of deception. But now I knew the truth, and I was no longer afraid. I took a deep breath and walked in. The air was filled with soft hymns, voices raised in worship. The warmth of the place was undeniable, not just a physical warmth, but a presence, a peace that I had only felt once before, in the presence of Jesus. A man, likely the pastor, noticed me. He approached with a gentle smile. "Welcome," he said softly. My throat still tight, my hands were shaking. "I need to share something." He took me to a quiet space where I told my story. How I had died, how I met Jesus, and how he healed me. As I spoke, tears flowed down my face. The pastor listened intently, and when I finished, his eyes were full of tears. "You have been chosen for a specific purpose," he said softly. "Jesus has called you by name. I knew what I had to do." As a result, the following Sunday, I stood before the congregation, dressed in white, stepping into the waters of baptism. My heart soared, but this time it wasn't out of fear, but anticipation. When the pastor dipped me into the water, I felt the weight of my old life lift away. Every lie I believed, every fear that held me back, all of it was gone. When I stood up, the church erupted in celebration, and for the first time in my life, I felt free. But my journey was far from over. My family's reaction to my conversion was as difficult as I had feared. My father refused to speak to me. My mother cried for days, and my brothers avoided me. I was no longer welcome at home. The rejection was deep, but I remembered Jesus' words. Some will listen, others won't, but you must speak. So I kept praying. I prayed for my family that their hearts would be opened, that they would see the truth that had been revealed to me. I prayed that they would have the same encounter with Jesus that I had. At first, nothing changed. My father remained silent. My mother spoke to me only with sadness, and my brothers treated me as if I were lost. But one evening, my sister called. "I don't understand," she said hesitantly, "but something in what you said is sticking with me." Tears filled my eyes. It was just a small step, but it was still a step. Over time, small changes began to happen. My father, who used to storm out of the room every time I talked about Jesus, began to retreat when I spoke. My mother, who had suffered because of my conversion, started to ask quiet questions about what I had experienced. It wasn't instant, and it wasn't easy, but I could feel God moving. And I would continue to pray. I would continue to share. I would continue to trust. The moment I emerged from that baptismal water, I knew my life would never be the same. Jesus called me, healed me, and saved me, not just from death, but from the lies that had kept me blind for so many years. I started sharing my testimony wherever I could. I spoke in churches, at small gatherings, and even online. I knew that some would listen and others would reject me, but I remembered what Jesus told me. Speak and let them choose. Connection with God, yet not knowing how to find it. Some listened with curiosity, others with skepticism, and some with pure anger, but I continued. I prayed for those who were still trapped in fear, that they might find the love of Jesus, just as I did. I knew it wasn't my role to convince them. It was my job to share the truth. And little by little, I saw lives being transformed. A woman reached out to me after hearing my testimony. She was secretly questioning what she had been taught. We talked for hours, and in the end, she whispered, "What if Jesus really is who he claims to be?" My last message to you is this: Jesus is real. He is not just a prophet. He is the Son of God. He healed me. He saved me. And he can save you too. I was blind, but now I see. And I pray that you will see too. If you're watching this, it's not by chance. Jesus is calling you. Like, subscribe, and share this video so that more people can hear this message. Thank you for watching.